I'm Mark Golub, and in the news, an anti-Semitic furor within the City University of New York. What was once a bastion for Jews in this city. Now Jewish students at 4 CUNY campuses describe some upsetting anti-Semitic behavior being directed at them. Jewish students are holding most responsible an anti-Israel group called Students for Justice in Palestine, also known as SJP, which at Brooklyn College broke up a pro-Israel rally by chanting Zionists off campus. Jews at Brooklyn College report feeling harassed, physically unsafe. They feel they can't wear a kippah or a Star of David or be openly pro-Israel. Well, in response to the complaints of Jewish students, the ZOA, the Zionist Organization of America, sent letters to the 4 CUNY schools involved: Brooklyn College, John Jay College of Criminal Justice, Hunter College, and the College of Staten Island, protesting the SJP chapters. And to give us a greater sense of the problem and to bring us up to date on where the matter stands now, I'm so pleased to have on our JBS phones Susan Tuchman, Director of the Zionist Organization of America's Center for Law and Justice. Susan, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Mark, for having me.
So, Susan, could you first add anything to the description you heard me give? Tell us what the problems are that Jewish students are experiencing at, again, Brooklyn College, John Jay College of Criminal Justice, Hunter College, and the College of Staten Island.
Sure. We work at ZOA. We work closely with students at many schools across the country, including at CUNY, and students on at least 4 campuses: Brooklyn College, the College of Staten Island, Hunter College, and John Jay College, reported to us feeling harassed and intimidated and outright afraid because of a hostile environment that's been perpetrated largely by a student group that calls itself Students for Justice in Palestine. And what we did was we documented the reports that were given to us by students and others, and we sent a letter not to the presidents of the individual colleges, but to the CUNY leadership, to the CUNY Chancellor, James Milliken, and to the CUNY Board of Trustees, laying out in detail, it's a 14-page letter, laying out in detail what was described to us at those 4 schools and urging the CUNY leadership to finally step up to the plate and take action.
Mm-hmm. By the way, Susan, how did ZOA become involved in the first place? When you say, students are somehow in touch with you, how does that happen? How does any student even know to reach out to ZOA?
Well, there are a few ways, Mark. One is through our campus department. ZOA has campus coordinators who work throughout the country. They are hands-on on college campuses. They are young people who are relatively recent graduates of college who were activists, pro-Israel activists on their campuses. And they work on college campuses around the country to educate students about Israel and to help them become informed and effective advocates for Israel. Mm-hmm. So we have a campus coordinator who works directly with students on the CUNY campuses, helping them create programming, helping them deal with problems. So sometimes those problems come to our attention through our campus coordinators. Sometimes they come directly to me because much of my work at the ZOA has been devoted to helping Jewish students who are facing anti-Semitism on their campuses. Mm-hmm. So I could get a call or get an email from someone who knows the kind of work that we do here and that we stand up strongly for students, and they may reach out that way.
That's wonderful.
We've been involved with problems at CUNY for a few years. A few years ago, back in 2013, I believe it was, there were problems at Brooklyn College. And people may have heard about what happened there because it engendered a lot of publicity. The SJP at Brooklyn College sponsored an event calling for boycott, divestment, and sanctions against Israel. It was a BDS event that viciously attacked Israel and urged Brooklyn College to divest from its holdings in Israeli companies. And four Jewish students, at least four Jewish students, attended this anti-Israel BDS event. Two of them were obviously Jewish because they were wearing kippas. One of the students was a well-known pro-Israel activist on campus. She was known to be somebody who knew how to ask tough questions of the SJP. And these four students attended the event, and they were thrown out. Mm-hmm. They were thrown out by a leader of the SJP in full view of faculty, administrators, security personnel. Not a single person intervened to help these four Jewish students. And the SJP member who threw them out claimed that they were disrupting the event, when a tape recording of the event later revealed that that was an absolute lie. Mm-hmm. These students had done nothing wrong. They were simply sitting there waiting for the event to go on and so that they could ask questions. And the ZOA got involved at Brooklyn College at that point. Mm-hmm. To remedy what happened to those four students. So we have a history of working with students at Brooklyn College, and then when problems accelerated to the other CUNY campuses, students already knew us.
I understand.
And they knew the kind of work that we were doing.
Susan, how did this past event at Brooklyn College work out?
Well, what ended up happening, and this is without ZOA's intervention, the CUNY leadership at the time instituted its own investigation, and the investigation concluded that those four Jewish students did absolutely nothing wrong. They were thrown out without any justification, that faculty, administrators, and security were present at the time and wrongfully failed to intervene, that these four Jewish students were publicly disparaged by a Brooklyn College spokesperson. They were portrayed inaccurately as agitators at this event when they were nothing of the sort. But the students involved did not feel that that was enough. Mm-hmm. They felt that they did not get a public apology from the leadership at Brooklyn College. They were never publicly apologized to by name. There were no changes in policies made to prevent these kinds of things from happening again. And if you Googled any of those four students' names, Mark, what you'd come up with is all this negative information about what they had done at Brooklyn College, negative information that was actually false information. So ZOA got involved. We ended up filing what's called a Title VI action. We filed a legal action with the U.S. Department of Education's Office for Civil Rights. And that's a federal agency that is charged with enforcing a federal law called Title VI of the Civil Rights Act. Mm-hmm. And that law essentially says that if you receive federal funding, as Brooklyn College does, then you have to make sure that your programs and activities are free from ethnic and racial harassment and discrimination. And we said that Brooklyn College had not lived up to that obligation. The government agreed to investigate the ZOA's Title VI action, but in lieu of pursuing the investigation, the government gives the parties an opportunity to engage in what is essentially a mediation of the dispute. And if the mediation doesn't appear to be going well, according to either party, then either party can terminate it and the investigation will proceed. Mm-hmm. But we ended up being able to resolve the matter by way of that mediation.
How?
And the president of Brooklyn College ended up issuing a public statement, publicly apologizing to the four students by name, mm-hmm. publicly acknowledging the wrongdoing of Brooklyn College employees, publicly acknowledging that those students were thrown out probably because their views differed from the views of the SJP. And Brooklyn College also implemented new policies with regard to student-run events. So with the hope that this incident would not be repeated in the future.
And remind me, what year was this?
I believe this was 2013.
Okay, so it was fairly recently, the last 2-3
Right.
years. What are you asking for in this instance? The story you just described sounds eerily similar to what students are saying is being done to them now. What are you hoping for now in your appeal to the Chancellor of CUNY, et cetera?
You know, I actually have to say that I think that what's been happening now, not to diminish what those 4 students endured at Brooklyn College, I don't mean to do that for 1 second. I can't imagine how they must have been feeling. But what has been happening more recently is just out-and-out Jew hatred on several of the CUNY campuses. I mean, there was what was called a Million Student March in the fall on several of the CUNY campuses, Hunter, Brooklyn, and these were rallies that were supposedly going to address high tuition, students' concerns about student debt, all very legitimate concerns. But the SJP turned these rallies into vicious attacks on Jews. Sometimes they use the code word Zionist, but sometimes they actually use the word Jews, calling for screaming at these rallies, Jews out of CUNY, Zionists out of CUNY, Zionists go home. One student reported to us that he was screamed at, and I'm not going to use the language, but he was screamed at to get the F out of my country, our effing nation. And this Jewish student who was being screamed at, he's an American citizen. He has lived in Manhattan his entire life. He was screamed at, he was called a settler, as if he didn't belong at CUNY. There were screams of get out of America, go home. One student reported hearing someone yell, we should drag the Zionists down the street. I mean, it was blood-curdling. And it really not just made the students feel unwelcome, it made them feel afraid for their safety.
Yes.
And really that's what we need CUNY to finally address. You've asked me what we have asked the leadership to do, and it's 2 very basic and reasonable things. First, we've asked them to publicly condemn what has been going on as anti-Semitism, as against the values of the community, and condemn the perpetrators. Make this a teachable moment for the CUNY community. Let them know what is going on, why it is wrong, who is committing the wrong, so that Jewish students will feel less marginalized and less afraid.
Yes.
Secondly, we're asking for CUNY to enforce its own rules and policies. If you look at CUNY's rules and policies, they make it clear, of course, there's academic freedom, there's freedom of speech, but with those freedoms comes the responsibility to treat members of the university's diverse community with respect. That's essential. The rules make it clear that every member of the community has the right to advocate for his or her position, including a position in favor of Israel, without having to fear any sort of physical or verbal abuse. Everyone has the right to be free from actions that endanger your physical health and your mental health. The rules and policies are crystal clear, and we're asking CUNY to enforce these rules and policies, investigate the SJP, and if the policies have been violated, then hold this group accountable in the same way that any student group should be held accountable.
Susan, when I read the report in the newspaper, I thought it said that ZOA was asking for the Students for Justice in Palestine to be shut down. Is that correct?
What we said, Mark, is that the rules and policies provide for expulsion or suspension of students or revocation of a student group's registered status if the rules are violated. And if the rules have been violated here, and they have been repeatedly across several CUNY campuses, we say that if the investigation reveals a violation of the rules, yes, the SJP's registered status should be revoked. It should not be entitled to the privilege of acting as a group on the CUNY campuses until it can show that it can behave in accordance with the same rules that apply to every other student group.
I understand.
This group is not entitled to special treatment anymore.
Susan, you're the director of the Center for Law and Justice at the ZOA. Right. When I read again the stories, they make this into a First Amendment issue where the SJP also has freedom of speech. How do you address that issue?
You know, we get this so much, Mark. Yeah. We often are accused of trying to shut down free speech, censor free speech. In fact, in CUNY's response to the ZOA letter, they give us a mini lecture on free speech.
Yes.
This is not about free speech. We are well aware of what the Constitution requires. I'm a lawyer. I'm not looking to shut down anyone's free speech. What I do want to make sure of is that Jewish students can go to college without being afraid to be openly Jewish and openly supportive of the State of Israel. Mm-hmm. We have not asked for the SJP's free speech rights to be shut down. We've said, in fact, CUNY leadership, you need to exercise your own First Amendment rights. You need to speak up. And you have rules and policies on your books. And if they're to have any meaning, you have to enforce them. If the rules have been violated, then you've got to hold the violators accountable. Okay. And that's being done, Mark. That is being done without any hesitation when other groups are being targeted.
Yes.
When African American students are being targeted on college campuses, or women, or gays, college leadership is holding wrongdoers accountable, as they should be doing. Mm-hmm. And we're saying you've got to treat Jewish students the same way.
By the way, in full journalistic disclosure, I want to say that my daughter is a professor of psychology at Hunter. Can you tell me, by the way, are there specific events at Hunter that you have that have been reported to you that bother you?
Well, you know, I just heard about something that happened, I think, a week ago. That, you know, it was not in our letter because it came after our letter. There was an SJP event at Hunter College about a week ago, and apparently the speaker alleged that Israelis are committing mass rapes of Palestinian women. And the audience was applauding. And no one got up and said, that is an out-and-out lie. That is a lie intended to incite hatred of Israel. So, I mean, there's one example that happened just a week ago, and it's exactly the kind of thing that we worry about, that, you know, these schools should not be used as a platform to promote lies about Israel. Yes. That's not what going to college should be about.
Yes. Tell me again now, what do you feel the CUNY administration's response? What has Chancellor Milliken done specifically to address the complaints that have come in from the ZOA?
You know, I'm not aware of anything specific that he has done yet. We did get a letter in response to our letter, and our letter was 14 pages long. I mean, it was chock full of details about what was happening on each of the 4 campuses. And in reading the response that we got from the chancellor, he doesn't suggest that anything that we have alleged didn't happen. In fact, it sounds like, as to most of it, he knew about it. And he justifies the reaction as a prompt response, even though there were some statements issued about some of the anti-Semitic incidents, but the perpetrators were never called out, and no one was ever held accountable under the rules and policies. So I don't agree that the response has been appropriate.
Okay.
And there is now going to be an independent investigation to review what has happened on campus and how CUNY has responded to
Okay. It's been reported, Susan, that Chancellor Milliken did hire outside attorneys to investigate these complaints. Do you know if that's true?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know who hired them. I know that they are two outside lawyers, and they have been retained to take a look at what's been going on and how the university has responded.
Okay. And again, it is reported that the Anti-Defamation League, the ADL, has commended the chancellor for CUNY's actions. Do you know if that's true?
I've seen the same reports, Mark. I saw the same report. I have not spoken directly with anybody at the ADL, but I did see that reported, that the ADL praised CUNY for this action.
It's interesting. We immediately associate the ADL with any issue of anti-Semitism in the United States, and one would have expected the ADL to be in the forefront of this CUNY College allegations and what is obviously a real problem for Jewish students there. And instead it's ZOA. And you're the Zionist Organization of America. How is it that the ZOA is involved with anti-Semitism in America when there seem to be other groups in the Jewish community whose mandate is to deal with this?
You know, I've been at ZOA, Mark, for over 10 years, and when I came to the ZOA to become the director of the Center for Law and Justice, I honestly did not know then that so much of my job would entail helping Jewish students on college campuses. I didn't even know that this was a problem. But when I began here, this is over 10 years ago, and within the first few months of my being here, I happened to read about problems that were happening across the country on one of the UC campuses. This was the University of California at Irvine. And I was very disturbed to hear that Jewish students were reported being intimidated by the anti-Israel group on that campus. At the time, it was called the Muslim Student Union. And I just, out of curiosity, I was shocked to read what I was reading, and out of curiosity, I reached out to the president of the pro-Israel group on that campus. And what she started to tell me was truly mouth-dropping. There was so much more to what was going on for Jewish kids on that campus that had been reported in the article that I had read. And she connected me with other Jewish students who connected me with other Jewish students. And what became very clear to me, I mean, these kids not only were enduring years of harassment and intimidation, but they had tried every which way to get help. Mm-hmm. They had reached out to some of the groups that you've identified. Mm-hmm. They had reached out to the administration. They had reached out even to the student group on the campus that was perpetrating the hostility. They said, look, let's figure out a way to communicate our views on campus without hurting each other. Mm-hmm. And it was really, hearing about all of the efforts that they had made, none of which had worked. It didn't seem like anyone was helping them, and I suggested to them filing a legal action, a Title VI action, and that was really the beginning of my undertaking this kind of work. It really wasn't anything that I was expecting to do here.
Good for you, Susan, but we've seen the work you've been doing over the years. It is absolutely marvelous, and we are lucky to have you. By the way, the University of California at Irvine is where Michael Oren, I believe, was supposed to speak, and a pro-Palestinian group virtually stopped him from speaking for quite some time. Am I correct?
You are absolutely correct. They interrupted his speech to such a degree that he had to leave the podium for over 20 minutes, and he had to cancel the question and answer period that was supposed to take place at this event. And that brings me to the point you raised earlier with me about, the suggestion that we're trying to shut down students' First Amendment rights. Look at what the anti-Israel groups are doing. They tried to shut down the First Amendment rights of Ambassador Oren. They tried to shut down the First Amendment rights of students and others who attended that event, who wanted to ask questions, who wanted to make comments. So, these anti-Israel groups have a very interesting view of the First Amendment. They're concerned about it when it comes to their rights, but not anyone else's.
Yes. I only have 30 seconds, Susan, but in 30 seconds, to what extent is this problem, which sounds like a part of the BDS movement, a widespread college phenomenon, or to what extent are there pockets, serious pockets, but only pockets of problems like this throughout American universities?
I don't want to exaggerate. I do want to preface my comment by saying that, in my view, most Jewish students are doing very well on their college campuses. There's vibrant Jewish life on most college campuses. But that being said, Mark, I see this as a problem on so many campuses across the country, even at schools that all of us consider to be hospitable to Jewish students. I cannot tell you how frequently I get contacted about a problem going on a campus that I never would think would be happening there.
Mm-hmm.
So while I do believe that most Jewish students are doing well, this is a very, very serious problem. I don't think any of us in the community should minimize it for 1 second.
Okay.
It's something that has to be addressed, and university leaders have to take it as seriously as they take the harassment of African American students and Muslim students, women and gay students. Jewish students have the same right to feel safe on their campuses.
I'll say it again, Susan. You are doing wonderful, wonderful work, and you work with Mort Klein, president of ZOA, who's also a staunch defender of Jewish rights in America, as well as the issues pertaining to the state of Israel. And I am thrilled that you had a moment to speak to us, to give us an overview. If you don't mind, I'd love to stay in touch with you so that we follow this story. And as the story unfolds, you'll come back on JBS and give us an update. But I thank you so much, not only for the time, but for the work you're doing. Kol hakavod to you, Susan.
And thank you so much for talking about this and letting people know what's going on, because so many people don't, and I am more than happy to keep you apprised of what's happening.
Very, very good. You be well.
Thank you. You too, Mark. Take care.
The thoughts of Susan Tuchman, director of the Zionist Organization of America's Center for Law and Justice. And you see a problem that is for New Yorkers in their backyard. So it'll be interesting to see how this story evolves. And again, it's nice to know that there are Jewish organizations. In this case, you have the ZOA that is in the forefront of fighting for the rights of Jewish students on campus. As always, my thanks to our director, Sloan Copeland, production coordinator, Serge Goldberg, to the associate director of JBS, Dara Golub, and to the producers of In the News, Kara Lilienthal and Jan Weiss. Until the next time, I'm Mark Golub. Be well, my friends.